I'd just like to ask a question. What does God need with a starship?
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Any signs of life?
Negative.
Have you tried all hailing frequencies?
Affirmative. No answer from the cube.
Have the department heads meet me on the bridge.
Already standing by.
Life sciences.
Same report.
Sir, are we gonna just let it hold us here? We've got phaser weapons. I vote we blast it.
I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Bailey. When this becomes a democracy.
You realize that the aim will, of course, be very crude.
I don't care if you hit the broadside of a barn. Just hurry, please.
Captain, why should I aim at such a structure?
Mind, Spock. Just get on with the job.
Greetings and welcome out to the USS Future Imperfect, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net. I am your XO today, Lieutenant Commander Mike the Birdman, but I'm not alone as I start trekking into the final frontier. I'm joined by my compatriot. He's been working with Starfleet in an unofficial capacity. I'm joined by my co-host from the great land of Kitchener,
Alex, the producer, Lieutenant Garbage Man.
Lieutenant Garbage Man.
Richie.
Although, if you are a fan of the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game, if you look in their latest source book, the Utopia Planitia Shipyards, you may notice a little bit of an Easter egg in there for the names of one of the ships. And that's all I'm really going to say about that. If you want to find a little bit of home flavor for us here on the show. So we are going to be talking about something really special that got sent to us from Paramount Home Entertainment, because we often do stuff that we get for review, holiday gift guide consideration. And this is something that we wanted to talk about in its own show in particular, because it encompasses something so large. So Paramount had sent over to us the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray and digital copies of Star Trek, the original motion picture 6-movie collection. But you can also buy these individually on 4K if you want to do that as well. All 6 movies are now present. The director's cut is now in one version with its original theatrical. There's extensive work done on the Star Trek, the motion picture, because that celebrated a milestone this year, I think.
Yeah, basically any versions that have been released previously on Blu-ray or had the 4K releases now individually with versions of the films are included together in these the set and then individually. So it's sort of they're combining all of these remasters that they've been doing into this set, which is awesome.
Yeah, so while some of these features are legacy, there are some new additions to certain films here, and I think that is deserving of a re-release, especially when it comes to covering Star Trek, the motion picture. So to get the big pink elephant out of the room, or to move the big giant Gorn wedding out of the room, let's get this out of the way. Some of these features and some of the features and the Blu-ray specifically are re-releases of previous editions. But when it comes to the 4K versions of these movies, these are newer releases. A lot of care has been taken in their restoration on multiple levels.
Especially with the motion picture and Undiscovered Country. Those are the two 4K releases that are also on 100 gig discs versus the 66 gigs for the rest. So they've maximized the amount of space for quality on here. Also, it's distinct. The motion picture has two versions, the regular theatrical edition and the director's cut, and they have distinctly different looking HDR tone mapping to further preserve sort of the looks that they were going for, one for the theatrical and one for the director's intended vision. So it's interesting. They are distinct. It's not like in sometimes where you can't tell the difference between a director's cut and a theatrical. You can. There's a distinct look and lighting and everything.
One of the things that I did with this, me and Alex kind of decided to split up duties here. I was on the quote unquote away mission to deep dive into the special features here.
Because
And
you're Mr. Special Features.
yeah, like that's typically how I judge a release. And 9 times out of 10, I find Paramount puts more effort into their special features than other companies. I mean, Warner Brothers will give
especially
you shorter ones.
especially for very specific franchises.
Yeah, like when it comes to Star Trek, they tend to, I guess, care more. Whereas with something like the only other company who does special features well at this current time is Disney/Marvel, because you couldn't release a bare bones version of, say, Iron Man, and
Yeah.
people would get pissy with you.
And traditionally Warner sometimes, but it's like there's certain
Short
franchise
10-minute things.
and there's certain franchises where it's like, hey, it's especially with Paramount where they're like, hey, we know our fans have have picked up our releases and they tend to double dip and triple dip. The Star Trek fans are willing to do that as long as you give them decent enough extra new features. So pretty much over the course of 20 years that we've had digital copies of these, maybe late 90s when the DVD started coming out, they've slowly been building up this catalog of behind the scenes features where some of the standard def stuff on here dates back to the late 90s, during the press junkets and everything, and slowly building up to HD stuff, and then even including things like new commentaries. I know that one or two of the films in here have something I've not seen before, which is a
Text commentary.
a text commentary in the 4K. Because of the way the menu system and everything works, they use like Java and all on Blu-ray and on 4K. It's almost like, remember those pop-up videos on music videos where there would be like on like much more music used to have that pop-up video. I think it was the whole show. It would be the music video, and then it would pop up with facts about the creation of it, or little weird things, quirks, like look in the background, you can see this extra who was also in this. It's that sort of thing. It's like, that's kind of neat, where if they don't have anything new or they couldn't get somebody to sit down and talk the whole time, here's factoids that pop up and information about specific scenes in text format.
One of the special features I want to draw special attention to, it involves Star Trek the motion picture, because this is a new version for 2022, and the special features go very in depth, where you get virtually a television length documentary clocking in at around 48 minutes, I want to say.
Yeah, and again, brand new, so we're now 3 or 4 generations of special features, previous recorded included, plus new stuff.
Yeah, and they really go into what made this so special. And in fact, they talk about how they rebuilt the Enterprise A virtually panel by panel, and it looks more spectacular than it ever has. And honestly, because of this special feature, the Enterprise A may have jumped considerably higher into my pantheon of fictional starships that I'm a really big fan of. And one of the reasons why is, like, I'm a special effects guy. I love special effects. And back in 1979 and 78, when this movie was being made, you'd had the big special feature, or the big special effects features like Star Wars. So a lot of it was miniatures work, and gorgeous miniatures work, I might add. But it's something that you don't think about. And during the course of this documentary, they mention it. They say, well, back in the old series, the Enterprise would be lit by a sun in a solar system, or light reflected off of a planet. But when they're going to deal with the V'ger threat, that's not always the case. So we need some way to light the Enterprise. And that's what made the Enterprise light up and look like it's a living, breathing ship that's got people on it. It looks more like an aircraft carrier with like lights on it and stuff like that.
And this is before the days where LED lighting was a thing you could even do, right? So
yeah.
you couldn't have like these tiny microscopic diodes. This is back when a small light bulb would have to be used for things, right?
Yeah, like, and it's neat because there's a shot, it's meant to be from behind the scenes, but they have this very specific lighting rig, and they pass over this model of the Enterprise, and it just highlights details of the ship, and it's incredible if you're a fan of special effects. And then when they started to recreate the model in HD, um, you really see the care and love that went into it. And I think somebody from this documentary, that's how they landed the gig to work on this restoration, is because, like, hey, I've been rebuilding the Enterprise for so long. Check, check this shit out. And they're like, okay. But there's also something that they talk about, the troubled production that this movie went through. And it's been no secret in the Star Trek kind of fandom that this movie had a very troubled time. But there's an excerpt where they talk about the score for this movie. And correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. The score for this movie was Jerry Goldsmith, right? He was the composer.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Putting me on the spot without looking it up, I want to say that yes, I think he worked on this, and then that's how he got the gig for
The rest of the track.
next gen.
Yeah. So there's a quote in the documentary, and it really made me think, and it really
yes, that's right. I think the theme for next gen was made for this movie at one point, or an early version of it. I don't even know if it appears in the film, but I'm thinking back to that set that I had from La La Land Records that was like all of the rare and obscure Star Trek songs on CD,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pretty sure that's what this was.
There's a quote, because the composer only had a limited amount of time to put together the movie, because if they didn't have the scene, well, they still had to compose the music whether they could see the scene or not. And the director had said, you gave me a score to the movie I wish I made. And that really makes my opinion of this movie change in such an amazing fashion, because you realize the care and love that goes into a property like this.
The score in the original motion picture is if you had to describe it in one word, it's splendor. Like splendor and wonderment.
Yeah, and that's something that Star Trek, the films flirt with really, really expansive soundscapes and musicscapes. Very rarely do they actually capture it. I think the original 6 do the best, whereas the Next Generation movies, some of their music hits, not all of it. The themes definitely hit.
It's funny with the next gen stuff. There, music wise, I really only ever think immediately of Nemesis, which is weird because people always say that's the weakest film of the bunch. I personally think it's Insurrection, but
yeah,
music wise, I actually think that of that next generation lot of films, it's Nemesis. I think of the ship, you know, when they ram the ships together,
shins on or whatever,
and it's that very sharp sounding synth where it's like as they're like inching towards each other to crash. That had a very distinctive soundtrack, much more so than others. And I think I might be wrong. I think that was one where it was like a mixture of multiple composers with like Barry McCreary or somebody doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It had like a Star Trek-esque version of like Battlestar Galactica, if that makes sense. That's the sort of feel that soundtrack had. The rest of the 90s ones with Next Gen Crew are pretty forgettable as far as I think of, like, music-wise. It blends in, but it wasn't like
it's
anything
Trek, but it's nothing special.
It was nothing that enhanced. It wasn't like the scenes were playing up to the music. The music was just sort of there.
Yeah, and
which I think a lot of people will probably agree with, that with Nemesis, maybe one of the best parts was the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And then if you go back to these original films, it's like the music also helps dictate the theme of the movie, and you can sum it up in very simple ways. The motion picture, you know, wonderment or splendor. Wrath of Khan, it's a dogfight, like a Mexican standoff. Mm-hmm. And that's it's almost like even the music feels almost spaghetti western like. And then you go to the third film, and I feel like Search for Spock's music was not
more spiritual.
It had like hope maybe being the theme of the music, mm-hmm. right? Like it's Spock, hope. Voyage Home had more some contemporary fun stuff because it was the lighthearted fun movie. Fives, I don't remember the soundtrack being anything super special. Undiscovered Country had moments, but I feel like the first 3 or 4 films had the most distinctive soundtracks.
Another thing that I really liked in the motion picture special features is they start talking about some of the restoration efforts to redo some of the special effects. Like, I specifically remember this, like the visual when the Klingon ship gets vaporized in the 2009 versions. It doesn't look great. Here, okay, that looks friggin' cool.
Yeah, because you remember these. I think it was Motion Picture and Wrath of Khan, 2 of the films with the first CGI effects ever. Like, there's I think it's either on the Klingon ship when they're firing. The phaser cannon is a complete CGI construction, and it looks all of its mainframe reboot, Dire Straits, Money for Nothing sort of, very simplistic geometric shapes. But when you're considering you're dealing with like 1978 to 1982 computer generated, like that little scene must have taken like weeks to render on a computer, right?
Now, there is something, Alex, that I think you will appreciate. So on Star Trek the motion picture disc,
Yes.
there's a special feature, and I want you to think back to any time you were on the bridge of the Enterprise A in the first movie. All those computer screens that show something, be it like a scan of something,
Yeah.
diagnostics, there's an entire special feature where it just shows those graphics.
Cycles through them, eh?
Yeah, and
Okay.
you see them in their proper, as high resolution as was available. So like this was shot on like 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, 70, whatever it is.
Because they would have put those in play. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and in some cases, if they might even still have the original like title cards for them that they would have been filming.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people take for granted because you think of stuff like DS9, Voyager, Star Trek, Picard, Discovery, whatever. When you pass by a computer terminal, yeah, there's going to be some garbly gook on it, and you don't think anything of it.
A lot of it was either that or it was literally a like plastic membrane with a bunch of blinking lights behind it. Didn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it was always done for a long time. And you just add the beeps and boops as you're pressing it later on. We take it for granted that nowadays, sometimes in shows they're lazy and they just use like a giant green screen and make a bunch of fake computers behind it. But a good show now will have a whole bunch of monitors, maybe put with like a sci-fi thing on the outside, and they'll actually have something on a computer feeding them imagery like a screenshot or screensaver. But back then, you really only had a couple choices. Either, fake computer screen membrane with a bunch of blinking lights like the original show and even into next gen what they had, or if you're having monitors, a lot of times it was literally a projection screen they were broadcasting things to, or they would replace it after the fact. The fact that they made all these different things is a lot better than just having static screens.
Yeah, like I'm happy to have that, and here's why. You think about how a lot of studios have all their stuff on streaming and stuff now. So you look at the success of shows like Disney's Mandalore, anything from Marvel,
or even Paramount Plus with their Star Trek stuff, right?
Yeah.
We always forget that because in Canada it's not on there; it's on Crave. But in most other parts of the world, that's if you want to watch Star Trek, you're watching it on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, which you can get Star Trek stuff on Paramount Plus in Canada now, but it did take a while.
It's all the classic stuff is now finally on there.
Yeah,
they've been slowly adding all the original movies and the shows. It's just the current stuff is not on there yet for us. Everywhere else it is.
Yeah. So the main reason I bring that up is because if you want a release of something, if it's like a streaming exclusive, it's hard to get. Whereas with Star Trek, it's never been a problem. So if you want Lower Decks, you want Discovery, you want Picard, you can just go out and buy it. Whereas if you want to buy The Mandalorian, you can't. It's something that I think Paramount has done exceptionally right by this particular IP. Now,
they know that their fans will, quite frankly, not accept not being able to own a new version, or when they're like, hey, we got 4K copies of this going to theaters and on streaming. the very next question from a Star Trek fan is, okay, when is my disc coming out?
Yeah, like
and the answer will not be never.
yeah.
Because they will not stand for it.
Now, to finish up me waxing philosophical about certain things, the special features, the ones that got the most attention is the motion picture has everything, but any legacy feature that has been from every single release, as far as I understand, so take that with a bit of a disclaimer, has been included. So that's every
it looks
legacy
like
features here.
like literally going back to, remember there's the thin individual DVD releases, then they had those special double box, where they were like the thick black boxes.
Mhm.
We're talking, features that they developed in the late 90s for the DVD and like Laserdisc releases, all the way up to the HD stuff, all the way up now to 4K with new stuff.
Yeah, like it's really nice to see. And then one of the other ones that's of note is when they released the Wrath of Khan in the director's cut a little while ago. They did have the farewell to Ricardo Montalban, which is really nice to have here as well. But
Yeah.
in terms of special features, there's hours of stuff here.
And the Wrath of Khan is one of the ones where people might get a little confused because it's had a few different releases, right? You've had the director's cut, you've had the regular edition, then there was, I think, a theatrical cut 4K release, and then a director's cut. They're both included. So
now,
that there's no more confusion as to whether or not you have the right, in quote, version that you want. It's there.
yeah, exactly. Like here, like hands down, if you want legacy Star Trek stuff with a splash of new, this is where you're going to come in terms of special features content. Now, I'm going to throw things to Alex because you're the guy who understands video, audio. You are my go-to person if something looks pretty. What makes this set stand out?
If you have a 4K TV, which I would say, I know some people said that they weren't sure what the 4K saturation was, but during the pandemic, it went up so high. I think over 80% of households have a 4K capable TV now in North America. And of those, well over half of them are HDR capable. So you should be fine here. Audio wise is the only thing I couldn't test out fully because I don't have a 7.1 Atmos system. I have a 5.1 Atmos system. So I couldn't take advantage of some of the height stuff, which would mean like if things are flying over your head, you might hear things, in more of a 3D space. So taking that out of account, I can't report how great that is, except for the fact that I know that they've always had really good sound. So it sounded great to me in all the releases. As far as video wise goes, the motion picture and Star Trek 6 seem to have had the most work done. In that, I was surprised Star Trek 6 was one that got it, but it's one of only two releases, that and the motion picture, being on a larger 100 gigabyte UHD disc. So to give you an idea, if you're streaming this on any platform, it's going to be roughly 16 to 20 gigabytes that you're streaming if you're watching a 4K copy, and it's 100 gigs here. So you're getting up to 5 times the bit rate, 5 times the quality you would from a streaming. So that's why a lot of fans will want it, because you're going to get every single detail. There's not going to be any compression artifacts or anything like that. As far as Star Trek's 2 through 5, they have pretty good, I would say, upgrades over the Blu-rays that they had previously. The Blu-rays from 2009 were a little digital noise reduction heavy, so they were a little washed out comparatively to contemporaries at the time. They've gone and actually back to the original film stocks and done new transfers for 4K and put especially more detail into the director's cut of the motion picture and Star Trek 6. But they all look pretty good. It's just those two are standouts. Like, we're talking 5 out of 5 if you're rating them on the visual scale of what you could expect from legacy releases that are in upwards of 40 years old now. That's pretty much it from the technical end. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, and these movies sound just as good as you would expect them to. I think the motion picture got some of the most care to it. Just to go back to special features for a second.
Definitely the motion picture, most care went into that, especially the director's cut. There is a visual difference between the theatrical release and the director's cut. director's cut having more attention to some of the lighting and some of the HDR looks fantastic on all of them, but if Michael, if you watch them and you sort of flip between them, you're like, oh yeah, like the 4K copy of the theatrical cut looks great, looks like a great 4K movie, and then you watch the director's cut, you're like, whoa. They put some real money, because that one specifically, they went back to the original negatives and shot it, rescanned it, and recolor timed it for every single scene.
When there is a spot in the special features where they're talking about sound, you don't realize how many layers of sound went into this. Like, they have this giant soundboard that's well over 100 channels. I want to say it might even be over 200 channels.
Wouldn't surprise me. And don't forget, in 1979, 90% of homes, when you were watching a home video, and even most theaters, were mono. Only like modern theaters, like where it would have been newer at the time, had stereo theatrical releases, and only like flagship, we're talking like the flagship theaters in New York and like super high end IMAX theaters had surround sound at that time. And the fact that they preserved all these tracks, and they had the ability to go in with all these layers and then remix everything to surround, because when you would have seen these in theaters, it was mostly mono is what you saw. So it's kind of amazing how you can get this like wide surround like experience when you're watching these films.
Yeah, like I'm very impressed with this set overall. So I guess in closing, to our final report to Starfleet HQ, is this set worth getting? So there's a couple of caveats. If you have the previous 4K releases, you could just buy the movies you're missing and move on. But
same with if you have the first 4 films in that 4-film set, unless you're very OCD about having every case look the same or have it all match,
and all the special features.
Yeah, you could just go and buy 5 and 6. But if you're somebody, a lot of Trek fans are like, well, now I got to get everything to match. If that's the case, then you can go all individual, or you can go with this, this 6-film set. But there are options. Like, I wouldn't say, if you've got the 4-disc set, I wouldn't say, you have to rush out and get the 6-disc or 6-movie set. You can just go and get 5 and 6 separately.
But yeah, I mean, overall, the 4K versions of these movies are amazing. I think the motion picture is definitely worth owning, simply because it does do so much visually, audibly, and its special features are astounding when you look at how much care went into those. And as my thoughts as a completionist when it comes to special features, it's worth owning this set because you are getting all the legacy stuff. So yeah, some of this stuff dates back to olden times, but the fact that you got everything here, you virtually have a virtual LCARS computer library at your fingertips. So worth it for that. So anyway, guys, that's our final report here on Star Trek. So expect this to show up on our holiday gift guide later on this year. If you want to pick this up, you can find this at pretty much any retailer right now, Amazon, Walmart, wherever, Best Buy. I'm sure it won't be hard to find. So anyway, for us here on the USS Future Imperfect, it's time for us to disembark and head back to Starbase because we are out of replicator rations, or I guess back then they had food cubes, didn't they? So anyway, I have been joined with
Alex, the producer.
I've been Mike, the Birdman, saying, and until next time, folks, live long and prosper.
Computer, this is Captain James Kirk of the USS Enterprise. Destruct sequence 1, code 1, 1A.
Computer, initiate the self-destruct sequence. Authorization Janeway Pi 110.
Computer, this is Captain Benjamin Sisko. Initiate auto-destruct sequence. Authorization Cisco Alpha 1 Alpha.
Begin auto-destruct sequence. Authorization Picard 47 Alpha Tango.
Self-destruct in 15 minutes. There will be no further audio warning.
My lord, the ship appears to be deserted.
How can that be? They're hiding.
Yes, sir. But the bridge seems to be run by computer. It is the only thing speaking
Speaking? Let me hear.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Get out!
3,
Get out of there! Get out!
1.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Watch where you're going, you dumbass! Well, double dumbass on you!